Hello and welcome once again to episode 67 of Code Completion. We are a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name is Dimitri and I'll be your host once again for this episode, and I'm joined today by my fellow completionists, Spencer.
Hello.
And Fernando.
Hello, hello.
So earlier today, Apple just announced the opportunity for Unlisted App Distribution, which inspired us to instead do an episode about sideloading. It's a thing that everyone seems to want, but nobody seems to realize we already have. So yeah, what better topic to discuss? Now, the most obvious thing that developers know, but normal people may not necessarily know, is if you give Apple $99 a year, you can install and build absolutely anything you want on your devices. This includes other people's apps. You can just get it, re-sign it, and put it on your device, and everything is great. So yeah, from a developer's perspective, sideloading already there, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. So with that, as an example, there are emulators for game consoles, right? So you can put the Dolphin emulator on and play Wii and GameCube games, for example. And I've done that before just to try it. Ends up that you need something to kind of do just-in-time compiling, and it doesn't work as great as you might think, but it's possible. Other emulators are a lot easier, but you just change, the bundle identifier and your team basically to make you sign for it, and it all works out. So that's definitely an option. However, so you mentioned that you just have to re-sign it, but that would only be if you had access to the source code itself, if it was open source.
Not necessarily.
Right?
So the signing happens after the app is built. So you can go ahead on the command line and take any IPA basically, or it's not even an IPA at that point. It's just a .app. You still need to package it as an IPA, which is secret sauce, a zip. And you can then just go ahead and load it on using Xcode or the old-fashioned ways with iTunes or the Finder nowadays. And yeah, all you need to do is give it a valid provisioning profile and signature, and you're good to go. But as you said, Spencer, there's a ton of apps on GitHub that are open source, and they basically explain to you how to do this step by step, because they know normal people are going to want to do this as well. So step 1, download Xcode. Step 2, click the build button. Step 3, plug in your device, kind of thing. Or reverse the order.
Wait for the Apple Watch to finish uploading symbols.
Oh yeah, that one takes between 1 and 2 weeks. So good luck. If you have more than one watch, just give up.
It's been getting worse, right? I don't want to go on a tangent.
It's been bad.
Yeah,
I think with Xcode 12, there was something that was legitimately broken about it, where it would just sit there and wait. That was annoying.
Yeah. And the worst is it's because your watch needs to give it permission to trust or whatever, that for whatever reason it can't remember. I do this daily to trust it. And if you mess up, because the cancel button is way large and the OK button is really tiny, it's really easy to mess up. And if you mess up, it's good luck. What I usually do, take off the watch, put it back on, log into it, and then it usually asks at that point. And that's when I'm lucky.
My
That's
God.
awful.
Yep.
So yeah, as a paid Apple developer, you can install absolutely whatever you want on your devices. So I was gonna
ask,
possible.
do you know if it's still possible to download a modified RPA through a web link? I remember that on the days before TestFlight, you had a payload, JSON text file or whatever.
Yes, so that's actually a great point. If you're a paid developer, you can distribute apps for others as well that they can go ahead and download. So there's a few ways to do this. You can go ahead and do this with an ad hoc profile. So basically, you ask someone else for their device UUID, and they will give you that UUID. You can put it in a profile, create the IPA through Xcode, through the usual archive process, and you can put it up on a web server and let them download it. In fact, this is how TestFlight, the original app before Apple purchased it and acquired it, worked. It would automate a lot of the system to make it easier. That said, those identifiers are locked to your developer account. So I think you have 100 per device type.
No,
nowadays.
that changed a while ago. Isn't it like 1,000 now?
It might be 1,000 per device type, but it's
It's
not
a
like
lot,
infinite.
but it's limited. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to manage it, and if you delete one, you can't reclaim it until next year. So there's that fun caveat there. It's not meant for letting anyone and everyone kind of use an app. It's just there to kind of smooth the process a bit when you need external testers. So that is totally an option. If you are a big businessy corporate thing, you can have an enterprise certificate. And this is the same process. So you make an ad hoc build. The only thing is an enterprise certificate doesn't need those UUIDs. So anyone can go ahead and install it. They just need to go to their device management settings and say trust. And then they can run the app that they downloaded via this method. So that kind of covers the manual process of distributing your app like to the outside world and what is possible there.
Yep, I remember before TestFlight having to do that with a couple of builds. It's funny because again, I don't want to go on a tangent here, but it Apple does make things easier generally, but by making things easier, they obfuscate a lot of the actual complexity behind this. Like, I'm pretty sure, I'll probably ask a few of my mentees, but I'm pretty sure none of them could explain to me how provisioning works, like at all.
I can't explain to you how provisioning works. It makes no sense.
I have a presentation.
It is frustrating. It is annoying.
That's true.
And it's so easy to get wrong. And as soon as Xcode kind of like managed it for me, I very happily started ignoring all of it because
I agree.
It was like a mess
The thing
from
is,
day one.
in theory, it's actually pretty simple. It's just in practice we usually tend to screw it up.
Yeah,
And by we, I mean Apple and my computer. Yeah.
You need to download a provisioning profile. You need to get a signing certificate that's like tied to that provisioning profile or something. I don't know the details anymore. It's so complicated.
Yeah, there were so many pages you had to go to just in your developer account. It was so confusing. And I joined in late. I'm sure it was more confusing.
And this was
back
per
in the day.
app that you needed to like set up.
It was horrible back then.
Yeah.
Although,
in fact, from the very early day, you could create a wildcard certificate, that was like awesome. But then Apple's like, stop using this as much as possible.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've also then got, kind of getting back on topic, like TestFlight as a side loading mechanism. And Fernando kind of brought up some interesting ideas on this in our initial chat before we decided to make this topic. So as far as TestFlight goes, how can you use that as sort of a side loading mechanism?
So TestFlight has been improving a lot. Right now, I haven't used like the public link, but I'm pretty sure you can just upload a build to TestFlight, have it go through a review process, which is completely opaque, but I think my gut feeling is that it's a lot less strict than the actual App Store process. Though I've had some TestFlight builds, I don't know if they like get lost in the queue or whatever, but I've had some TestFlight builds take like 48 or 72 hours to be approved. And
way
sometimes,
longer than regular builds.
Yeah, and sometimes they're very quick. So who knows? I have no idea. Maybe they just run the automated stuff for TestFlight builds. Yeah. Anyway, once you go through the quick review process, for a build number, you can update that build. No, sorry. For a version number. Yeah, that's right. So once you approve like my app 1.0 for TestFlight builds, you can just upload unlimited 1.0 builds as long as you keep increasing the build number. And none of those go through review again, as far as I can tell, right? So in theory, and I don't think anyone has any actual data on this because we're all so very afraid of the king finding out. But in theory, you could just pass the initial review, go ahead and change whatever you need to change, upload your emulator or whatever, upload a new build number with the same version number, and you should be good to go for 10,000 people. So the
and this is not
reason
10,000 devices, it's Apple IDs, and they can install it
Yep.
on as many devices as they want.
Yep. The reason I originally brought this up is because I think this is as close as we could get. Like, if Apple would lift the 10,000 user cap, this would be as close as we could get to like sanctioned side loading. But then Dimitri brought up a few good points about in-app purchase and iCloud, which I think go hand in hand. But yeah, I don't know if you want to fill us up, Dimitri.
Yeah, so first of all, to have TestFlight, you need a paid developer's account.
Yep.
So that's one thing. That's for the developer, though. That's not for the people like downloading. They can be anyone, so that's really nice. But for the person that's uploading, you need to have a paid developer's account, which is $99 a year, which in the grand scheme of things is probably the least of your concerns. As Fernando said, you need to go through a review process, which means that if you upload your emulator as is, it's probably going to get denied. You need to upload a dummy, this is my first app thing, and then let that get approved, and then upload your emulator. You mentioned the public link. That totally works. I've done it before for apps in general, and it's very nice. Like, you just put that link out, and people can download it, or like click on it and join into TestFlight themselves. They can onboard themselves, which is neat. One thing to note is I don't know how easy it is to manage your 10,000 email list. You can choose a group, which the TestFlight link is connected to, and then I think you're relatively free to kick people out and then like rejoin, like open up spaces again. Like, that is not really like strictly regulated, so you can quickly sort by who is actually installing it, kick people out that are not using it, and bring in new people as you need. So not too many downsides there. That said, it is a TestFlight build, which means it is a sandbox build from the point of view of in-app purchases and CloudKit and all of that fun stuff. So anything that requires a live, like on the store kind of experience is just not going to be possible. I guess you can put your own credit card processing if you really feel like trying to get banned. Like, that is totally something you can do.
I think so. One additional thing that just came to mind is that you're also limited by time. TestFlight builds have a 90-day limit.
90 days.
90 day, yeah.
Yeah, so even if you could, like, even if Apple gets rid of the 10,000 cap, like, it would be very annoying to have to update every 90 days.
Yeah, agreed.
But even then, like, it's interesting. The 90-day limitation, I think, is a true limitation. But the other, like, not having access to real in-app purchase and not having access to CloudKit, I mean, I think that's part of the deal, right? If in my hypothetical scenario, Apple were to make like TestFlight like sort of a sanctioned, quote unquote, sideloading mechanism, I think it would be fair to say, all right, you do you, but you don't get access to CloudKit, you don't get access to in-app purchases, and maybe you don't get access to anything else that requires like Apple servers, which I think is fair. I mean,
No maps.
yeah.
I was going to say no weather API, but they're not providing a weather API yet. So that one will probably be a killer for a lot of apps if they do add one in the future.
And by killer, we mean Sherlock. No, I'm kidding. Maybe.
Well, it's already there's been a weather app since day one. You can't call that one a Sherlock.
Well, no, I can't. But I can try.
A fun fact about the weather API, the United States government provides a free weather API for basically all of the US and the rest of the world. Like, it's global. So you can get all this data yourself as long as you kind of do so in a rate limited way and respectful, like don't like spam the service. But that's how Dark Sky works. They just wrote a wrapper on top of that.
Nice.
Yeah.
So
Where it used to work, right? Because they got acquired?
Yeah, they got acquired by this fruit company or some sort. And now they probably use that same API.
Yeah, I'm sure they do. I thought it was more than just like NOAA or whatever the API, the government API was. I think it was kind of a conglomerate of things. But yeah. So you kind of also got like building to your device as a free developer, just like I talked about kind of initially. We've got the ability as developers to kind of just put whatever we want on our device. You can also do that with what would be called a personal team in Xcode. You just sign up for... Do you have to sign up for a developer account?
No, I think you just download Xcode. You say, yes, I agree to your terms and conditions.
Oh, that's it.
Which is not
legally
Add an
Apple
ID. And then you're kind of good.
So the only limitation then is you can put, 3 apps on your device at a time?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's pretty limited in how it like constrains you, because it's really meant for the student use case. Like, sure. You don't have money, so you got these devices from your school, and you just want to learn how to use this thing called Swift or whatever. So this will help you kind of do that in a way where you might have been limited by the simulator up until that point, but now you can actually run it to your device itself.
Right. So I remember when we were teaching, and when I was teaching at both boot camps, we'd have students just, not need a developer account until they actually needed it. And so when they wanted to run things on their device, they'll run into this limitation. I can't remember if it's 3 apps or whatever. But then when you want to put a new app on your phone, you just delete the old ones and you're good to go.
Oh, right. So I remember that.
In theory, you're like, oh, I want a GameCube emulator, a Nintendo DS emulator, and I don't know, a Game Boy emulator, and that's your 3. Then you're like, oh, I want to try, I don't know, a PlayStation emulator, just delete 1, which is kind of a pain, but it's a free option assuming you don't have a paid developer account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so same as the paid kind of setup that we described earlier.
And is there a limit on the number of devices?
No.
That's a good question. Neat. I don't know.
That's pretty good, because if there was a limit, that would be very frustrating. Like,
I suppose how many devices? iPad. Yeah, like how many devices realistically are they going to have under one Apple ID?
Yeah, before the point where a $99 a year thing starts seeming trivial. Like, oh, I have my 17 iPads. So what am I going to do? That said, someone was very smart, and they noticed that if Xcode is doing this, they too could do this, right? So, Spencer, do you want to give us a brief overview of what the AltStore is?
Yeah, so the AltStore is basically the only, I suppose, alternative app store, realistically, in kind of the, I would say, normal sense of an app store. For iOS devices. So what it is you have an app running on your macOS device, and I honestly don't know exactly how it all works, but through this macOS app you install a plugin for Mail, and that's running some sort of way of refreshing certificates for your phone, but it also will install an app called AltStore on your phone. And it's basically just, I guess, like, if you're familiar with repositories from like the Cydia days of jailbreaking, it's kind of like that. You add repositories, there's some built in, so the guy, his name is Riley. I can't remember his last name, but there are a couple apps on there. One is a Nintendo DS emulator. One is that's actually the only one I can think of. But
Delta.
In theory, Delta, yeah. But in theory, what it allows you to do is completely skirt the App Store, but also distribute your app. Perhaps if it, for example, like Delta, the DS emulator, that would never actually get on the real App Store, and so it's sort of this alternative store, AltStore, for distributing your iOS apps, in theory. But I've used it before just to kind of see, and it's, like I said, you have to have this Mail plugin that what it does is you have to give it your Apple ID and your Apple ID password, and it will continuously try to re-sign apps for you. And that's kind of what Dimitri was bringing up with Xcode doing the signing. It's just somehow this Mail plugin, and again, I don't really know what the link between the Mail plugin is, but this plugin will try to connect to your device generally 7 days is when the certificate expires, and re-sign the app for you so it doesn't expire in 7 days, and it kind of continually does this.
In theory, We were discussing like packaging the IPA with a certificate and whatever, and then putting it on a web server, right? And you can just click a link and download it. You can also, like another sanctioned way back in the day was also through email. You can send someone an app through email, and they should be able to install it. So
the IPA directly via iTunes.
Directly. So I think that probably has something to do with it. That's really interesting.
That makes sense. Yeah, I never understood like why it has to be a mail plugin, but maybe that's what it is. I was just thinking, why isn't it just a normal Mac app and, you know, you can do the re-signing on there, but maybe that has something to do with it.
Yep, maybe.
So it's an interesting idea. I've kind of been following it for, I don't know, a year or two now, and the theory is that they're going to start opening it up to be able to actually sell things on that AltStore and actually, you know, have revenue, where I think right now if you add another repository, it's just kind of like as soon as the repository is on there, you can download the apps, but it's not like the developer themselves is able to make any money as far as I know at this point. I could be wrong. So
yeah, it's not really a store at this point. It's more of just in the gaming terminology, it would be a launcher, right?
Sure.
A way to kind of get those apps onto your device and take care of the details for you, so that way you don't really have to worry too much about it.
So it's interesting. I think it's cool. I think Apple would never get to the point where it's sort of officially sanctioned, but you know, this unlisted app distribution is, I suppose, a step in the right direction, if a very small step.
Yeah, so we didn't really talk about what the unlisted app distribution is. Yeah. But this is a brand new thing that Apple just announced, and it allows you to create App Store records, essentially, like stuff on App Store Connect, that still goes through review. It has all the same parameters as a regular App Store app, except it does not show up in the actual App Store. So you need a direct link to go ahead and download it, and Apple basically says, hey, you control who has access to this link, not us. So like you can put it behind a forward and make sure that you only give it to people who are authenticated, do whatever you need to do, but once they have this link, they have access and they can continuously update from there. So that's on you to kind of decide. You cannot migrate an app from the regular store to this. It needs to be a new record. Even if it's on the business store, which is another like sanctioned off App Store kind of method of distributing apps that we didn't even discuss. But you require like all sorts of other stuff for that. So the whole reason sideloading came up is because like at first glance this feels like, oh, Apple is folding their hand and they're giving us something like sideloading, when in reality it has nothing to do with that. It's just, here's a solution for the people who need to distribute an app, like Uber for drivers, for instance. You don't want everyone downloading that app by accident. So you want to be able to kind of have that available, but for people to download, but you don't want to advertise that it's available. And there's all sorts of apps that meet these requirements. And traditionally, companies have just gone through the enterprise distribution route, which I think Apple wants to sunset if this is kind of becoming available, because it allows them to review everything and know what is going through, rather than like random casino games that generally is the way that the enterprise certificates are abused. Like we hear about, oh, Facebook abused them, but like by the 10 times more, there's like casinos that are popping up and getting shut down all the time because that's like the other use case for them. One thing that we are all like a bit cognizant of is like outside pressure forcing Apple's hand. And that is something that governments will likely do and are starting to do. Like we've seen it in South Korea, where the government is basically telling Apple, hey, you need to allow third-party like payment systems and so and such. The Netherlands had a different one for what was it, dating apps, and now they're starting to give Apple a fine on the weekly because they're like, your solution doesn't exist yet. Come on, give us $50 million or $5 million.
It's $5 million
up to a max
50.
of 50, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I have a feeling Apple's just going to pay them the check and be like, okay, moving on.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Like, either way, this is a PR issue for Apple. Because they can just say...
Like, normal people, I don't think they care about any of this.
So, no, normal people don't. But other governments are watching, right? Because if Apple's like, I don't want to pay, like, I'll just ban, I don't know, dating apps from the Netherlands App Store, that speaks a lot. If they do pay and they don't, they don't actually do the thing that the Netherlands government wants them to do, that's going to say something to other governments. And if they do
like
pay...
free money kind of thing?
Yeah, and if they do pay and they do the Tinder thing or whatever, that's going to say something to the government. So really, Apple is in a lose-lose-lose situation here. There's no winning move. The winning move was to give us what we wanted before governments got involved. But it's way too late for that. And now I think this is going to be like the issue of 2022. It's starting very slow, but there's already like quote-unquote actionable items on several smaller places. Mm-hmm. So if like, for instance, I saw on a post by DHH that he was all like, if like Apple cannot ignore the Netherlands because they're part of the EU. So you don't want Netherlands to be like, all right, you don't want to make a deal with me. Let me bring in my friend, which is the EU.
Sure.
And that's going to be like interesting. I don't know. It's at the very least, what we're seeing is Europe at the forefront of digital rights enforcement.
So one thing I want to bring up, because I feel like it's always possible. What if Apple says like, EU, we don't want to deal with you, and they just ban the EU? And PR-wise, I have a feeling Apple is going to be way more successful than the EU is. Point the finger at the EU and said, it's because of them that we can no longer like sell iOS devices and iPhones and stuff. And I can easily see that being a disaster for the EU. Like, just as much as we can have a situation where it's a disaster for Apple. Like, it depends how the cards play.
I think you're overestimating Apple's goodwill in Europe. Because Europeans are very, like, from what I've read and seen, like, Europe is angry that the Americans have the technological stick, maybe. Mm-hmm. And
I mean, Europe also revolted when the EU wanted to say, oh, like, gas bad, we need to go to electricity, and they burned down, like, cities. Like, that's a hyperbole, but that, like, it did happen. So I don't think the people of Europe care as much about the same things that the EU as a government system cares about. So, like, as much as we want to say that, oh, the EU can step up and force Apple to do this or that, I can also imagine the future where Apple just decides, we don't really care this much about you, the EU, and we can twist these facts as much as we think we can, which is not the right thing to do, like, mind you.
I don't think that possibility exists, to be honest. Like, I'd like to see, like, how much revenue Apple derives from the EU, and I'm pretty sure it's at least, I don't know what, 30%? Like, it's a sizable... It's probably a sizable number.
I'm going to guess China eclipses it.
Yeah, I'd say the U.S. and probably, China and maybe, like, India make up a very large majority.
But even then, like, I don't think you can just do that.
I think it would be insane if they just blacklist an entire, like, very large chunk of the world.
There's so many layers to this because, like, Apple actually exists in Ireland, right?
That's true.
So,
but are they a part of the EU still?
Depends on Ireland. I think they're part. I think they because North Ireland is not part of the EU, and then Ireland is. I think they're part of Ireland, so they can get EU.
But
like,
didn't
benefits.
the UK just like secede from the union of the EU?
So that would be North Ireland is gone. So
we're getting
the
into
other
like,
Ireland is okay.
Spencer,
it's
we were looking so smart here, discussing geopolitics and now.
Yes.
Ireland? Where is Ireland? Is it in Asia?
Yes, us North Americans, we know everything about geopolitics. We definitely don't pretend like we're the only people that exist.
I mean, we only named our cities after other cities in the world and then assumed these are the only cities, right?
We have York, but it's newer.
You have Mexico, but it's newer.
Yeah.
We even one up our neighbors.
So this is from the second quarter of 2018, so a while ago. But Europe was 22% of revenue. Like, you can't just say, screw it, I don't need that 22%. Like, Tim Cook wouldn't last a day if he was like, we're going to cut our revenue forecast by 22%. And we're going to get into a fist fight with the EU. Right?
I mean, Epic essentially decided to pull that exact thing.
Against another company. Right?
Well, from Epic's point of view, that's the scale. Like, I would say Apple's scale is the EU. If you're talking about, like, a wealth point of view.
Yes, but the intermediary was the government. Here, your opponent and the intermediary are both the government. Like, I wouldn't want to get into any of that. No way.
I'm not saying Apple will. I'm just saying it's a possibility in this wacky, wacky world that we live in. It would probably be very entertaining to watch that sort of thing unfold. Because it honestly feels like Apple is headed in that direction. Like, Apple had so many chances to course correct this, but they have decided to keep their heads in the sand.
They don't want to do it.
And
all of this...
I don't know what endgame they're assuming here. It's like, in general, dictators, they don't last forever. People eventually decide the dictator's got to go. And there's no good endgame being a dictator. Like, it's fun at first, but at the end, you got to go. And it's a gruesome way at the end. There's no, like... there's no easy way to...
Like, just the last dictator in line. That's the one that suffers. But if you get to live your life as a dictator and then die peacefully and then the revolution starts, who cares? You're dead.
Yeah, right? But I wouldn't say that's the vast majority of the dictators out there.
Why are we should do a history podcast.
We should definitely not do that.
History
podcast. No, I'm out. I think the whole thing with like the unlisted app distribution and all of these, every step that they've taken have been so small. I think what they're trying to do, or at least what it seems like to me, is they're trying to give you an inch so you don't ask for a mile later on.
Yes.
Like, they're just like, but it has nothing to
here's
do.
Here's a little
That's
platitude.
The only problem.
Right? And it's like, and like Dimitri brought up earlier today, he brought up the article and he's like, well, this definitely isn't enough, or this isn't what we wanted. And that's the whole thing. It's not what we want, but they're trying to make it seem like, but come on, like, we're the good guys. We'll give you this. Just stop talking about it now, please. Mm-hmm. But it's,
There's literally zero incentive for doing it from them. Like, we're gonna have to pry it away from them. Because it's a ton of money and control.
The incentive is they get to control the experience, because I would say the worst outcome of this is the government forces Apple to say, hey, if you have an iPhone and you go to a website and you tap a link, you should be able to download an app with no warning messages whatsoever and have it on your phone. Like, that is, I would say, as someone who has watched other people struggle with technology, a horrible solution to this problem.
It's like downloading...
You can make the point that, on Macs we've been safe. But we've only been safe on Macs from malware through good tech hygiene, The common sense of not clicking on the flashy yellow thing that says download me now. But the vast majority of people will click that thing.
Yeah, it's like, how many times have you seen the download Flash Player thing on a pop-up, right? My sister has a Mac, and she's like, I had to download this thing. I'm like, no, come on. Like, she's not, dumb, but she's also not tech literate in the same sense that we are. And so it's I agree with Dimitri. Like, I don't think that's a good end game. I also, honestly... like, the process of the AltStore is cool, but it's also a process, and you have to have this mail plugin running on your computer 24/7, and sometimes you have to plug your phone in because it doesn't work automatically wirelessly. Like, a first-party solution of some sort, I don't know what it is, but that makes it easy even to the layperson would be preferable.
And
I don't know.
Yeah, so that's I think the biggest problem is we need a solution that's going to work for normal people, that's not going to get them like in serious trouble in one way or another, which, like, let's face it, if we let anyone put software available, like, that software is going to find ways to break out of sandboxes, because sandboxes aren't perfect. I know everyone says, oh, but iOS has sandboxes, it's a perfectly safe system. Yeah, but no. Like, there are plenty of like ways that us as developers, we can probably spend a week thinking of how to like abuse that in some way. Either like just by like putting an image. Huh?
We're arguing a point that has nothing to do with the actual point. Like, I agree, the sandbox is safe-ish in the sense that it can be broken. Like, I'm sure there are ways to break it, but that could happen right now. Like,
yes,
there have been countless apps, emulators for one, and there's a ton that we can point to where you go into the app as a like inconspicuous app, and then boom, you lift a flag once you're through review, and that's it. And that's
but there's one record to delete at that point, if that makes any sense.
They have a kill switch for apps on the iPhone.
Okay, so here, let me break that right for you right now. I make an app that really messes with stuff, okay? Bad app. I make it so that way every download is slightly unique. There goes your way of killing it. Does that make sense?
What do you mean slightly unique?
Well, it just randomizes the code path, so you get a different signature every time. It's a different app for every person that downloads it. If that like makes any sense, it's totally possible to sidestep a lot of these security concerns if you don't have a single place where you have a record for it that needs a human to like submit new entries and go through the whole rigmarole again to get it there. My point is that I think a review process for apps to be downloaded is a necessary part of our future as like a technology-based society. Like, we need some sort of human to kind of look at stuff and at the very least moderate how much stuff it gets added, so that way, if worst case scenario, you have a fraudulent app that's like stealing money from people or convincing them to do other things that are not going to help, then you have a way to like kill those apps in a reasonable way. Like, yes, we can say, oh, you can scan software to determine if this is malware or not and then delete it afterwards, but you need to have reports of that. You need to kind of get that information funneling in, when the vast majority of people that have crap all over their Macs like ask me to help them fix it. Like, none of that helped, you know, because they didn't download anything bad. They just downloaded a bunch of adware that should have never been allowed in the first place. Does that make sense?
But we already know that the review process doesn't actually help with that. Like, for example, the issue is that the review process is fallible, and any process is going to be fallible, right? You just have to decide whether you want it to be fallible towards the permissive side or fallible towards the unpermissive, or whatever the word is, restrictive side. For example, the whole Wordle debacle that happened a few weeks ago with the Wordle clones and whatever. Like, I don't think the Wordle clone that became news on Twitter and whatever from that guy, I don't think Apple had a right to remove that app. I think it was a ripoff. I think it was a clone, and I think the dispute should have been between the owner of Wordle and the other person, not between Apple, because Apple did not remove the Wordle clone until it was like everyone raised hell on Twitter, right? So it was reactive by marketing.
But they were able to do something.
But my point is they shouldn't. Well, how come they get to decide, right? Why do they get to decide? That's why we have like a government with trademarks, with courts and everything. They get to decide everything. So in my point of view, review shouldn't be a part of the process because of that. Like, I don't think Apple should have the final say, like, What if I want porn? What if I want emulators? What if I want everything that Apple deems incorrect? Like, here's another example, and I think this is a good one. During the first months of the pandemic, probably the first two, the general consensus was don't use N95 masks, right? Because they were in short supply and medical personnel needed them. But I think Twitter was one of them, that Twitter or Facebook was one who started censoring whether like you should wear masks, whether the virus came from a lab, whether like several different theories, and they started censoring them. And then it just so happens that over time, these things change. And so are we to expect that Twitter and Facebook, or in this case, Apple, are constantly monitoring every single situation from every country? Because they are in every country. And so I just think it's an untenable position here when it comes to the review. They're going to mess up. So why? I don't know.
I think, yeah, well, I think Dimitri has brought this up before in like a way previous episode, but it would be interesting to have something separate from the App Store that allows a much less sort of rigorous review, where it's like, I agree that, you know, explicitly malicious code should not be allowed, right? However, I would love an easy way to download an emulator without having to sit there and compile it for, 30 minutes or whatever. The things are huge.
And there's no guarantee that it's a good emulator or that it's not going to cause your battery to die or this and that, but it is not outright trying to scam you. Like,
I agree.
The bar is low at that point.
If you could literally have an alternate store, not the AltStore, but like an alternate Apple sanctioned one that is reviewed for malicious code, but like that's it. The review process, the bar is so much lower in that sense, but there is like a minimum level of quality. Not unlike kind of what we would assume the beta review process is like, where it's like your app doesn't really need to be that functional to get through that review. Right. Kind of that sort of thing.
I think in the end, it's all about money. Like, Jobs gave an interview on D8, I think, where this quote, I love this quote, I'm going to butcher it, but he's like, just ask people, right? If your app wants to get permissions to their contacts, just ask them. And we should be asking them every time. Just ask them again and again and again, until they get so tired that they tell you, stop asking me. I think that ethos of like, I'm going to treat you like an adult, but I'm still going to be safe. Like, you should allow this or you should not allow this for so-and-so. I think that's what ultimately the ecosystem needs. It needs, are you sure you want to install this app? Yes. Are you really sure? Yes. Put in your Apple ID password. Get your Face ID. Send me a letter. Like, some things that are very annoying, but
that's the thing, is that we have that. Like, through either the non-automated means of building it yourself in Xcode, or going through the AltStore. Yeah, but the AltStore is. Like, you can explain to someone over the phone how to install the AltStore. And through that process, that's the same thing as like tap on this link 17 times to get through. Like, the level of annoyance is definitely possible with what we have right now.
It's not annoyance. It's permission.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, you can go ahead and install something in that way, and it will work for indefinitely. Like, it's not something that Apple can then kill switch on, other than, I guess, malware for a specific build. But that's about it. So we have those sideloading capabilities. What I think we need, because that's not enough. There are still laws that are going through that are trying to tell Apple, like, hey, you need to allow sideloading. Google allows sideloading, and still they're part of this. Hey, Google, you need to allow sideloading. Like, it doesn't make any sense from like a law perspective, because the capability is there, and it's just as annoying as it needs to be, as you said, Fernando, of treating someone like an adult. If you really, really, really want to put the thing that's going to blow up your phone in front of you, like, you can go ahead and do that if you really, really, really want to. But you're going to get plenty of like obstacles along the way to try to prevent you from doing that. That exists. What I think we need is something that is more obvious from hey, it's just as simple as the App Store. Like you tap a button, you click a link, and it's on your phone. We need that, but that cannot be anything. I think that has to be sanctioned in such a way where there's a record in one centralized place, in the case for Apple, App Store Connect, where Apple can go ahead and say like, hey, you've made 17 spam things that are trying to rip people off of all their savings. We're going to prevent you from making a new account.
But they're not even doing it right now. They're not even doing that right now, right?
Yes,
how could we believe them?
There is the semblance that it's there. And I think that semblance that it's there is a little important because it puts a stop to just anyone going and doing it, because now there are steps involved with getting it on the App Store for your scam to work. It's not as simple. True.
There's a ton of scams out there. A ton in the App Store sanctioned.
Yeah, but Fernando, how many of those scams are of the variety that it asks you to go to a store and get all your money out in gift cards and send it to... Does that make sense? Like, that kind of scam does not exist. Yes, there's a $200 a year, $200 a week weather app, which seems like they are getting addressed just very slowly, and it's still super easy to find, like, new ones. But I think that they are addressing those to a certain extent. And I think that they can continue to address those at the capacity that they're addressing them, while still having an alternate way for people to upload things that Apple has no say in the business direction of. Because that's ultimately
yes.
Yeah, like what
I
we're
think we all
concerned
agree
about.
on that.
Apple does not have a right to tell some other business in the same like country that they live how to do their business. Like, that is something that if it's a legitimate business, they should have no right to do anything about. So that as an option needs to become possible, and it needs to become possible in an easy way, as in the user just needs to tap a link and they can go ahead and download it. That said, I don't see how Apple should be forced to have anything that they don't agree with on their App Store. Like, it's their like public gateway.
I agree.
So Apple,
100%.
If they have this as a possibility, hey, guess what, Apple? You got to kick off so much junk from the App Store. You can have your pristine golden palace that you want, that is spotless in every scenario. Like, you search for something, you only get useful results. Like, you can have that by just allowing...
Seal of approval.
Yeah, the Nintendo seal of approval, exactly. You can totally have that as long as you also allow an alternative that can allow Epic to do what they want. It will allow Basecamp to have, not need a subscription. Like, hey, they can do what they want at that point. They're not doing anything illegal. And if they do something illegal and the government's like, hey, Apple, you got to remove this because it's illegal, then Apple can remove it easily, you know? And it'll be hard for legitimate business to kind of get back on if they kind of break those lower level rules of kind of causing mayhem. And it will be hard also if, like, you as a scammer need to invent a new business every single time, because that is also, like, there's also limits in terms of your government allowing you to do that. You know, like, it takes time, it takes effort. It's a little harder than just putting up a website and just putting some god-awful scam that's just going to kind of ruin someone's life. You know, it's a little harder. And that little bit of difficulty, I think, is super important. Just like you said, Fernando, of like, I should be able to download anything. You totally can. It's just a little harder that no one in their right mind is going to do it unless they really want that emulator. And they're going to get in trouble for downloading the one that's going to blow up their phone. And they learn that lesson, and they learn it once, and then they don't go through all of that effort again. They're going to be like, well, it better be easy, otherwise I'm not going to... Like, I don't know. Last time was a disaster. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think your palace analogy was right on point. Especially, like, I think the issue is Apple wants to have their cake and eat it too with the review process. Like, don't allow weekly apps that charge $50 a week. It's very easy not to allow them, but they don't have the grounds to remove them. because they're not doing anything illegal. It's scummy, but I don't think it's scammy, because you get to you have to actually agree to paying that amount, right? It's just scummy and immoral, but it's not scammy. I don't think. I mean, we're getting in the weeds here, but the point is, if Apple did really have like an avenue to just be like, all right, you know what, you do you. I'm gonna check you for security purposes, but then you get to do porn, politics, drugs, whatever, what have you. I don't care. Just stand over there, away from me. Then they can kick out all the stupid apps, like the weekly apps, the clones, the web apps, everything, and then just say, no, we don't like your idea. Go the other road, right? Go and take the other road. I think
but that's what they do that while they're ahead. That's the big problem.
Agreed.
Because if the U.S. government decides, if you are a company that makes more than $1 trillion ever, Apple, Google, Microsoft, done. Like, it's only singling them. And then they say, you need to allow alternate distribution in this exact way, as determined by our panel of experts that had no knowledge of anything other than they were mad at Apple at one point, then that's going to be the worst outcome.
Case scenario. Yeah, I agree. 100%.
And
totally.
Like, examples of worst outcomes. Does anyone navigate a website nowadays and not hate the fact that it asks you, do you want to allow cookies?
I was just going to bring that up today, dude.
That is something that the EU said on their high horse, this is the way it's going to be, and therefore all websites are now crappier. Like, that's just a fact of life, that the government does not make the best decisions. GDPR, however, was a great decision. So, like, it goes both ways. But it requires a lot of nuance that not everyone that's outside of the technology sphere really kind of categorizes very well. And it's very easy for us as people who are really comfortable with technology and don't make bad decisions very easily to say that, no one makes bad decisions. But the same goes for, like, everyday people. We can say, be responsible during a pandemic, and everyone's going to be irresponsible during a pandemic. Like, that is the fact of life, that not everyone has the same priorities or knowledge about the domain space than you do. And it's...
Ireland? Hello?
I mean, I think Dimitri's idea is, like, ultimately the best formulated thing. We should just, like, hit up Tim Apple and tell him what's what.
Should we make a whole website, the whole petition thing? Like, to convince, dear Apple, please save yourself.
.com.
Save yourself before it's too late.
Kind of true, though. I don't think they're going to do it. I think they're going to have their hand forced, honestly.
I agree. I think, I'm very, very curious as to what happens with the Netherlands case. Because
I don't think they're going to lose any money out of, like, making a decision like this. It would be a PR
$50 million
win.
I think it's like an hour?
Pocket change.
Yeah, someone made the calculations. It was like an hour worth of revenue. So it's nothing.
Yeah.
But like I said, I think the implications are really, really, really big. So I don't know. Like, where was it that in China, they just jailed, I read it a little bit ago, they jailed 50 executives from steel companies because they underreported the whatever for the whatever. I don't know.
Like their revenue for the fiscal year?
No. It wasn't a tax issue. It was like a weather thing, like the English is so hard. Global warming thing. Like their methane emissions, whatever, they underreported them, and now they're in jail. And I'm like, well, maybe. I mean, the U.S. is the complete opposite, that it doesn't matter what happens. They're just not going to do anything about it, I don't think. So I honestly believe that the next move is on the EU. But we'll see.
Just not a repeat of the cookies, please. Not a repeat.
For real, though.
Like, if a government suggests exactly what I suggested, maybe that's a win.
I mean, I would, sure. Yeah, that would be great.
But, like, realistically, what sucks is, and they can choose who
reviews it then. Like, wouldn't that be the best of, like, all worlds? The government gets their keys to the kingdom that we decided to give them. I mean, that's why we have a government. We choose them to be in control and to make the decisions. So maybe that's the ultimate outcome. I just worry that they're gonna end up making poor decisions as a result, or it starts off great and then in 20 years when we've moved on from app stores, we're still stuck using app stores because of nothing else is changing, right? And everything has been debudgeted into something else.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the cookies is the pop-ups are always there. It's always an accept all button or a customize, then you have to go click freaking buttons to uncheck everything, and it's it doesn't even use a cookie to remember your options. That's
I just the absolute worst part of this.
Yeah, I want to read this article. I'm not gonna spend 10 seconds clicking 8 buttons for tracking cookies, only essential cookies. It's I'm just accepting all because I don't actually care that much. And so it's have we solved anything? No, we've just made it an annoyance.
Somebody sent me a website that was one of those joke websites where it's cookies, newsletter, article, blah, blah, blah. And then you keep clicking and you never get to the actual content. It feels like that nowadays, honestly.
It really does. It's so annoying. Especially on mobile where that pop-up is a third of the screen.
Yep.
And it scrolls with the thing. It's permanently blocking
it's persistent.
Something.
Yep.
Yeah. Good stuff. This week's episode of Code Completion is once again brought to you by Bon Voyage. Bon Voyage is a full-stack iOS application development course from Johnny B. With this course, you'll learn how to build both a full iOS client app and an associated React administration application. The app and the site will integrate with Firebase, as well as Stripe and Plaid for payment processing. Now, Bon Voyage is a place to book extravagant vacations, and you'll gain the skills to build the iOS app from the ground up and integrate everything you need to provide a world-class vacation booking experience. To find out more and sign up for the course, visit Bon Voyage, that's bon-voyage.app/course, and be sure to follow Bon Voyage's instructor, Johnny B. Codes, that's JONNYBCODES, on Twitter to stay up to date with all his courses. Thanks again to Bon Voyage e-commerce app course for sponsoring Code Completion.
Johnny B. Codes tonight. No, go, Johnny, go. Sorry, I had to.
Excellent. So with all that out of the way, it's time for Compiler Error, a segment where I get to test my fellow completionists' knowledge about Swift, Apple, and all things development. And today we have a theme, the AltStore. So,
oh my. Oh. Cydia. What an insidious compiler error.
Statement number 1. AltStore works by re-signing the apps you download with your own Apple ID, making them unique to you, but they need to be re-signed before 7 days pass. Statement number 2. AltStore gets around installation limits for free developer account by running a server on your Mac to install it through iTunes' Wi-Fi Sync. Statement number 3. Since free developer accounts are limited to 3 apps per device, AltStore first uninstalls all provisioning profiles, installs the new app, then reinstalls the other provisioning profiles. Statement number 4. AltStore also runs on Windows and Linux with the added benefit that iTunes is not required for the installation of apps. So, Spencer, why don't you go first as the leading AltStore expert?
Oh, yes, such an expert. Okay, interesting things. I think kind of the thing that jumps out to me initially is number 2. I don't believe it uses iTunes' Wi-Fi sync, but I definitely could be wrong. I don't know. Wait, by running to install,
which has been renamed many times, but it's still the same technology. But
yeah, wait. So are you saying installs the AltStore app itself through iTunes Wi-Fi sync?
No questions. That's cheating.
No,
you gotta take it at face value. You gotta take it at face value.
All right. Well, and then
the AltStore app and additional apps. So everything goes through that.
Okay. Number 1 sounds correct, although there's a slight caveat that if you have a developer account, it can actually only need to re-sign them every year. But yes, that sounds right.
Isn't it 6 months? Pause. For development builds, like through the developer certificate, I think it's significantly less. For ad hoc, I think it's either 6 months or a year.
I was able to install something. I think it was Dolphin or maybe it was Delta. I don't know.
It's a
with my
year.
developer account, and it said it refreshes in 365
Yeah,
days.
because it's bound to your certificate, which is a year, right? You have to renew once a year.
Anyway,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
probably a moot point for this. My bad. I believe it also runs on Windows and Linux. Man, this is actually quite tough. I'm kind of stuck between 2 and 3. I don't know.
The more you know, the harder.
Yeah, really, for real. I would assume that it uninstalls the provisioning profile for the app, but not all other profiles. I don't know. This is tough. I don't know. It's gonna be like 4. I don't know. I'll go with 3. I'm not sure. I'm fairly sure there's a Windows version. I don't know about Linux, but I could be wrong as well.
Okay, Fernando.
Have fun, Fernando.
You are wrong, but if you
I
are
am.
wrong, I don't want to be right, Spencer. It's number 3
Aw.
for me. Because I think
Ooh. Will it be a sweep? In
yeah,
one
I
way
don't
or
think
the-
number. I was surprised by number 4, because I don't know whether iTunes is required for installation of apps.
Yeah, that
I
kind of
think
hinges
it
on
is, but I don't know. And what I like about this one is I don't think you uninstall all provisioning profiles, because if you were to do that, you would need to reapprove every profile, and I don't know how AltStore would save profiles that are not their own. So I think it's this one.
that. I think it's that mail plugin though. I don't know. Let's see who gets swept.
So let's go in order. AltStore works by re-signing the apps you download with your own Apple ID, making them unique to you, but they need to be re-signed before 7 days pass. This is absolutely correct because the personal apps, so Apple IDs, the provisioning profiles for those only make them valid for 7 days. So, yeah. Again, for that reason, I think it's not the certificate that we care about the expiration. It's the provisioning profile. So when you do a beta build, I think it's still 6 months. And I don't know what the development...
It's a good question.
Interesting.
Like,
Honestly, well, the
installation
profile
lasts for.
does have a reference to the certificate, so I would be surprised if it lasts
Because
less than
the
a
certificate
year.
can expire, but something you've installed from the App Store will stay forever. If that
Well,
makes
that's
sense.
good. That's because it's Apple's certificate.
And same on the Mac. On the Mac, like if you have a developer ID and that expires, the app still runs.
Right.
So it's
Even
using the
if
same
it was
system.
distributed outside of the App Store.
Really interesting.
So that goes to number 2. AltStore gets around installation limits for free developer accounts by running a server on your Mac, which installs it through iTunes' Wi-Fi Sync. And this is absolutely correct as well. iTunes' Wi-Fi Sync will go ahead and make a connection to the device and make ports available, and that's how you can kind of communicate. So the app will communicate to the server and tell it, hey, I need this app that I just signed. Can you give it back to me? And that's basically what it does. So it's pretty rudimentary. I don't know exactly what the mail plugin's involvement in this is. I'm assuming it gets to run as an Apple process and therefore is more privileged.
Right.
And that's
okay.
probably what allows it to communicate over the ports that iTunes is using. But that's just guesswork on my end. I'm sure there's a good reason for it. Which brings us to number 3. Since free developer accounts are limited to 3 apps per device, AltStore first uninstalls all provisioning profiles, installs the new app, and reinstalls the other profiles. And both of you think this is suspect, and the reason I would think it would be suspect is because although we're saying it's limited to 3 apps, we are dealing with provisioning profiles for some reason. And unfortunately, that's what you need to do because the personal team app limit is not an app limit, it's a provisioning profile limit. So the device will only accept 3 provisioning profiles from a personal team of any ID. So it can be from 3 different IDs, it can be from the same ID. And then it's not going to accept any new installations. But if you uninstall all the provisioning profiles first, let something install a new app, and then put the provisioning profiles back, you are in a great place to still have all the apps that you downloaded, still maintain all the settings because the provisioning profile signatures did not change, and therefore you can go ahead and install more than 3 apps that way. So that's how it gets around that.
All right, I gotta go. Bye.
Which brings us to number 4. The AltStore does indeed run on Windows. It does not run on Linux as far as I know. And it does require iTunes
of course,
to be downloaded. And iCloud, it seems. So iTunes and iCloud need to be downloaded. I believe they deal with some signing in terms of the communication with the device, and that's why it can maintain that connection. There are some Linux ports of certain parts of the system, like USB Mux daemon, which when you plug in your device will go ahead and make a TCP connection available through different ports, and you can basically say, hey, open port this on device and let me communicate to it. And that's how iTunes communicates over a cable, and Wi-Fi Sync basically does that cable emulated over Wi-Fi, which is super jank, but that's probably why iTunes is necessary for this whole transaction.
Gotcha.
Sweet.
I thought about it too hard, for sure.
It was Linux. It's always Linux.
It's always Linux. So as always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Please be sure to follow us on Twitter at CodeCompletion to know when new episodes get released. And feel free to tweet at us if you have opinions about the App Store. We want to hear them. So if there's ever a topic you wanted to dig into in the future, let us know, and we'll be sure to give it a try. Please be sure to share this with your friends and family, so that way they can also be learning along with us and knowing where countries are, because we are apparently very good at that. Once again, I want to give my thanks to Fernando, who is at From Junior to Senior. That's FROMJRTOSR on Twitter. Spencer, who is at Spencer C. Curtis. That's SPENCERCCURTIS on Twitter, for joining me this week. My name, once again, is Dimitri. You can find me at Dimitri Buñol. That's DIMITRIBOUNIOL. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
So, Fernando left us, but it's just you and I now for the awesome topic of universal control.
Yeah. So I think it was yesterday or the day before, I was about to, in our Slack group, say hey, whatever happened to universal control? And then I Googled it, and apparently it's a thing now.
Yeah.
I didn't know. It's just kind of released without any fanfare. So I thought that was very interesting.
It's part of the next set of betas.
Yeah.
It's on iOS 15.4 and macOS 12.3. I keep thinking we're on 10.12, and I'm like, that's ancient.
That is very old at this point.
I'm no longer able to accurately give macOS version numbers without thinking too hard about it. But it seems like it's finally been brought back to the betas. And if you don't remember, this is what allows you to have iPads next to Macs, and then just move your cursor around, and the keyboard apparently follows along with it. And all the gestures that you're used to, everything just works, and it seems super magical. So
that's super exciting. I have an app called Synergy that kind of basically does the same thing, except between any
Computer
device,
thing.
Windows, whatever, or
minus iPads.
Yeah, desktop OS. It's super nice, and it's nice when with this widescreen that I have, you can split it to do picture in picture. Well, not picture by picture, I guess. So it essentially turns into two actual 27-inch monitors, and it's all seamless. So you can have a Windows computer on the right, and just using Synergy to kind of go between that without having two keyboards and mouse or trackpad is super nice. So having that for testing on a real device for an iPad would be super nice. I think that's the thing I'm most excited for, rather than actually using it as a feature. It's just for testing apps on device without
because
having
then you can just reuse the keyboard that you're currently using.
Yeah.
And you don't have to switch your hands over to the little keyboard folio thing.
Yeah, exactly. So that's cool. So, uh, I know you've been following Blender, but apparently now OBS is also getting help from Apple.
Yeah,
Is
so
that
I
right?
literally saw this right before we recorded because that's the first time I looked at Twitter in like 2 days. But OBS just got a big patch that came directly from Apple to improve the screen recording capabilities. So that's super neat. And in addition to that, the new Mac OS that's just coming out, like it's just in beta, so not available yet, has a new screen capture kit, which allows you to capture the whole screen or individual windows or just an app, what have you, in a performant way, so that way you're not like burning CPU cycles. So
That's
that's
super
really
cool.
exciting too.
Yeah, I know that. Now that I think about it, I can't think of any apps really, but oh well, I guess like Zoom and Slack, for example, you can share your screen on there, so like that would be nice for that. Well,
And I would
probably
like to
not
say,
Slack.
as someone who has tons of windows open, that experience is an absolute travesty. Because
True, true.
if you click share on Slack, I now need to wait. I've counted 25 to 30 seconds for me to be able to choose anything. Like it's just gonna
Oh
be
my.
paused while it just enumerates the amount of windows I have, I guess. Because it has the option for the screens, and I have four of
Yeah,
those, which is already probably like three more than it's expecting. And then I have my innumerable amount of windows that I have open, which
right.
computer runs fine with, by the way. It's just Slack will now barf on me when it comes time to like choose a screen, because I never want to share a window. That's like a horrible experience. I want to share my beautiful screen that I like cleared everything off. You can see everything in its glory.
Yeah.
It's a great experience. But that is not possible to do in a quick and easy way when you have lots of windows open with Slack. Same with Zoom. It's
Yeah.
just as bad there. So yeah, I'm excited for this API because I know none of those apps will use it, but maybe a new app that comes out will use it, and we'll be able to switch to that. That's why I'm excited.
That's awesome. Is that what Blender is then using in this change, or is it something completely unrelated?
For OBS, you mean?
Or
I
sorry,
have
yeah,
no clue.
OBS.
I have
Oh,
no clue.
okay.
It might just be that Apple put some effort into like doing it the right way rather than doing it this is maybe the only way.
The
Because like
cross-platform
none
way.
of this
Yeah.
is well, not a cross-platform way, but like I'm sure OBS does not have a cross-platform solution for recording the screen. Like that does not exist.
Oh, that's probably
They
true.
have
Good
like
point.
specific implementations for every platform. But none of these APIs are like well documented, if at all. They're all from like the 90s probably. Like interacting with core graphics and the Windows server is probably not fun. So the chance to do it wrong is high. And you don't know if you're doing it right unless you're Apple, because they're the only ones that have the hooks to do it right. So this ostensibly allows them to do it the correct way because Apple just wrote the code for them, and then it won't eat as much CPU as it would have otherwise, right?
Cool. That's super cool. I wonder if it's and if I mean you might know, is it if it's just like an Apple Silicon thing, like it's taking advantage of the encoders on there, or if it's just a general macOS, API.
I
Thing
think
that
it's
would
just
work
a
on Intel
macOS
as well.
API because it has the screen buffer, so it can go ahead and route it to somewhere else at the same time. I mean, what's
Not
that
like an
called?
optimization per se, but just like using it the right way
Yeah.
type of thing.
What's the sidecar thing that Apple has?
Uh-huh.
That
Yeah.
essentially uses the same thing. They need to record the screen to send it
Oh,
over, right?
that's fair.
So that is probably using this same technology. And it does. So I did take a look at the screen capture stuff. It doesn't like handle sending it over the network. It just gives you the screen buffers in a way that you can go ahead and do something with whatever you need to do. But that is probably way better than rebuilding the desktop from scratch with every window that they likely need to do at this point, which is why the mouse always looks jank. Like it doesn't look like a mouse; it looks like a cutoff of a mouse that got slapped on top.
Yeah.
Sometimes it has like a little plus at the like click point. It's like, who left that in? So, yeah, I expect things to be a lot nicer as a result of this new framework, but also since the APIs have been there to do it the jankier way, and there have been a whole ton of like screen recording entitlements I've read to be able to do it the right way. Maybe this is kind of just cleaning up and making sure that's done in a performant way as well.
That's cool. I wonder, I mean, I guess I kind of know the answer. I was going to say, what is the reason that Apple's doing this? And the answer is money, but like, why are they going after Blender and OBS? Is it just like market share of people? So, hey, content creators, you can record your screen now, or, you know.
I think it's like a last-ditch effort to save the Mac as a platform. Like, the only native apps that are kind of left are either Mac indies, who like never left to begin with, or they are from these open source projects. Like, no big company is really making any native apps anymore. Like, Adobe was probably, even though it's a native app, they're not using any of the native UI frameworks or anything like that. And they were probably the first to abandon ship to have a cross-platform solution that works well on Windows and macOS, because your professionals are jumping between types of computers all the time. They don't have just one kind that they're used to. So I think Apple's trying to save what little is left, and to kind of cement the position that those apps have, so that way they can't get overtaken further, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I don't know if it's too little, too late, but I feel like it's a worthy investment from a giant corporation to kind of nurture its remaining like software ecosystem, especially when one side of it is doing great, the App Store, and the other side of it is kind of languishing a bit and turning into a place for websites to be, and that's basically it. Like, that's what a desktop is for so many normal people, is a place to open the web, and to navigate with a little more comfort than a tiny screen. But people don't generally use computers for the tools that they can provide. They use it as a web browsing device, and that's the reality of it. And that's why everything is turning Electron, because that, I have no idea what that was. But yeah, I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting that like kids are, you know, not using like a Windows or a Mac computer anymore. They're just using Chromebooks and kind of only getting trained in the ways of the web now.
Yeah.
Not
because that's honestly the platform that has taken off the most, right?
Yeah.
Since technology has kind of become so integrated in our society, it's either the web or now the mobile space is the hot new goodness. But there's little reason for normal people to kind of lust after a computer, if that makes any sense. Like, it doesn't provide them with a lot of value if they're not in the technology space. Now, there are like plenty of applications where, like, even if you're not in a technology space, if you're in the graphics world, then a computer is useful. But even that is kind of taken over by Figma, and it's not great, right? So, like, yeah, that's the land we live in now, and we either embrace it and try to make it better, which I think Microsoft has been doing with Windows. Like, Electron apps no longer need. I don't know if this is what actually happens or not. I haven't touched a Windows computer in a decade. But it seems like Electron apps can use the system-provided framework, which means you don't need to duplicate an entire web browser with every app.
That's cool.
Which is like a perfectly great thing to do in terms of saving resources. Whereas on the Mac, people are under the impression WebKit is years behind Chromium, and therefore they don't want to use it, when for the purposes that of what they're doing, like, that's gonna get you 100% of the way there, just as well as Chromium would. It's just you need to do something in a slightly different way, maybe.
Right.
But that's not cross-platform if I need to do something in a slightly different way. But no one is like caring about like making the interface tailored anyway. So like at that point, then no one cares for optimizing the experience. because everything is fast enough now. And it's not going to be Slack's fault that the computer runs out of juice when it is. Like, honestly speaking, for a light workload, if I have Slack open, that will eat the most power.
Yep.
If I have Xcode open, then that will eat the most power because I'm doing other work, and then Slack is insignificant in the background. So, yeah.
Yep. Good times.
Sorry, Slack. You picked to make you decided to make an Electron app, so you're the one that we use as an example the most.
Yeah.
Because it's the only one that we use regularly.
Yeah, and you don't allow multiple windows, and I would give a little bit of a pass if that was the case. It's like
they allow multiple windows. You open it in Safari, and then you have multiple windows.
That's the worst, though.
And it is like, what's the point of having an app at that point? I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, and there was a whole thing, and I'm pretty sad about this. Is like Jira is removing their Mac app, which is a bummer because we use Jira at work, and I actually really like the Jira app, like without having to go into the website
and that is a native app. Like it's using. UI frameworks are provided by the system and are ostensibly probably faster than the web frameworks that can emulate that as best they can. Because that's what they're doing. They're emulating the code so that way it can run on your system, which is not great when you have a supercomputer at your disposal. Like, sure, you can run emulators all day, which is what the web is, or you can run native stuff and not consume all the power in existence.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that whole thing is super interesting, and you see companies go back and forth. Like Dropbox, they had their dichotomy a while ago about, cross-platform or not, and I think they're on the native train right now. But it's like you got to make the decision of where do you spend your resources, and unfortunately, people I think that the easy way out is cross-platform when it gives a worse experience, although it's probably faster to make, and that's ultimately I think
you can hire 100 people to work on your cross-platform app, or you can hire 5 people each to work on the individual platforms, and there's 3 of them, and there you have tailored experiences. They all look different. Who cares, because the same person's not using all 3 of them, if the same person's using 2 of them, they use both of those platforms and they would appreciate them being slightly different. That's all there is to it,
and following UI design guidelines that for the platform.
Yeah, that makes sense. But alas, I'm not put in charge of big companies for the reason that I'm not in charge of big companies. So that's that.
Well, we're going to get you there so you can change them from the inside.
I'll complete their code.
The real goal.
I think that...
Yeah. My bad. All right. See ya.
Bye.